Spring break is supposed to be about freedom. No classes, no responsibilities. Just friends, parties, road trips, and memories. You'll laugh about years later. But for these three people, spring break became something else entirely. A remote cabin, deep in the woods where a stranger showed up at 4 a.m. pretending to be a forest ranger. A college party trip to Mexico where one bad decision nearly got a student killed after he vanished into the night. And a lakeside mansion packed with friendly strangers, where nobody seemed to know each other, nobody could explain what was happening, and leaving suddenly felt like the most dangerous thing you could do. 3 different vacations. 3 different locations. 3 stories that started like ordinary spring break adventures and ended with questions that still don't have answers. And trust me, by the time you hear what happened in that lake house, you are going to be asking yourself the same question everyone involved still asks today. What was really going on there? This happened about 4 years ago during spring break. My girlfriend, Anissa, had been talking nonstop about getting away for a while. Nothing fancy. No crowded beaches, no tourist attractions, no packed hotels. She wanted the exact opposite. Her dream was finding some quiet cabin in the middle of nowhere where we could disappear for a few days and forget the world existed. At the time, her younger brother Hunter was staying with us while he was on break from school, so he ended up joining the trip too. I searched around online and eventually found a cabin that seemed almost too good to be true. It was deep in the woods, completely isolated, and surprisingly cheap. I remember noticing how low the price was compared to similar places. For about 5 seconds, I thought it was weird. Then I completely forgot about it. Friday evening, we loaded up the car and drove out there. The farther we drove, the fewer signs of civilization we saw. Eventually, the paved roads turned into smaller roads, then narrower roads, and finally a winding stretch that felt like it was leading us into another world. When we finally arrived around dinner time, I immediately understood why the place was so cheap. Not because it was run down, because it was isolated. Completely isolated. Standing on the front porch, you couldn't even see the road you had driven in on. The surrounding forest swallowed everything. Trees stretched in every direction, creating walls of darkness beyond the property. At the time, I actually loved it. It felt peaceful, private. Like exactly what we'd been looking for. While unloading our bags, we noticed a large outbuilding sitting off to one side of the property. It looked like a storage shed or workshop. The thing that stood out was the heavy padlock hanging from the door. Hunter walked over and played with it for a second. "That is new," he said. "What is?" I asked. "The lock." He tugged on it. "Looks like somebody replaced it recently," I shrugged. "Probably keeps equipment in there." That explanation made enough sense and none of us gave it another thought. Inside, the cabin was cozy and surprisingly nice. We unpacked, started making dinner, and settled into vacation mode almost immediately. The first night was perfect. We sat on the porch with drinks, talked about absolutely nothing important, and enjoyed the silence. Well, what we thought was silence. Once darkness fell, the woods came alive. The sounds were non-stop. Frogs, insects, rustling leaves, branches moving in the wind. The forest produced this constant wall of noise that somehow became relaxing after a while. At some point later that night, light rain started falling. The sound of raindrops hitting the roof mixed with all the wildlife noises and created this weird, peaceful atmosphere. Before going to sleep, though, I remember hearing something larger moving around somewhere beyond the tree line. Something heavier than a rabbit or raccoon. Something that made branches snap. I figured it was a deer, maybe a bear. Either way, I wasn't worried. Eventually, I fell asleep. Then something woke me up. Thump. The sound was so sudden and loud that my eyes flew open instantly. For a moment, I just lay there staring into the darkness. Had I actually heard something, or was it part of a dream? I wasn't sure. My heart slowed down and I started drifting back towards sleep. Then it happened again. Thump. Exactly the same sound. This time I knew it was real. I checked the clock. A little after 2 o'clock a.m. Beside me, Anissa was still asleep, completely unaware. I debated ignoring it. Every instinct told me to stay in bed. But another part of me kept imagining a bear wandering around outside. If there was a problem, I needed to know. So with a level of reluctance I can't properly describe, I climbed out of bed and grabbed a flashlight. I didn't want to go outside. Not even a little. Instead, I slowly checked the windows. The rain made visibility terrible. Most of the property was hidden behind darkness and reflections. Then, I noticed something. Near the outbuilding, footprints. Fresh footprints. My stomach dropped. The ground was muddy from the rain, and there were marks leading toward the locked shed. They definitely hadn't been there earlier, and they definitely weren't ours. None of us had gone outside after the rain started, at least not that I knew of. For a second, I tried convincing myself they belonged to Hunter. Maybe he'd gone out without telling anyone. Maybe there was some logical explanation. But deep down, I knew there probably wasn't. The footprints didn't look like animal tracks. They looked human. I considered going outside for a closer look. That idea lasted about 2 seconds. No chance. Absolutely no chance. Instead, I double-checked every lock in the cabin and eventually forced myself back into bed. I managed to fall asleep again. Unfortunately, the night wasn't finished with us yet. The next thing that woke me up wasn't a strange sound in the woods. It was knocking, hard knocking, coming from the front door. I don't know if you've ever been woken up by someone knocking on your door at 4 in the morning, especially when you are staying in the middle of nowhere. But it is a kind of fear that is difficult to describe, because the moment you hear it, one thought enters your head. Someone is outside, someone knows you are here, and someone wants your attention. The knocking echoed through the cabin. Bang, bang. Anissa shot upright in bed. "What was that?" she whispered. I already knew. Someone was standing on the porch. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I looked at my phone. A little after 4 o'clock a.m. That made absolutely no sense. Who would be knocking on a random cabin door at 4 in the morning? And why? The knocking continued. Louder this time. More aggressive. I slowly got out of bed and made my way toward the front of the cabin. Every step felt heavier than the last. Anissa followed behind me before stopping several feet away. She looked terrified. Honestly, I wasn't doing much better. When I got close enough to the door, I froze. I could hear someone shifting their weight on the porch, standing right outside. Waiting. Before I could say anything, a man's voice came through the door. "Forest Ranger." The words hit me like ice water. "There was an incident reported in the area," he continued. "I am conducting welfare checks. Need to make sure everyone is okay." For a second, I just stood there processing. A forest ranger, at 4 in the morning, at a cabin, hidden deep in the woods. Something about it felt wrong immediately. Still, I didn't want to escalate anything, so I responded through the closed door. "We're fine." A pause. Then I added, "Everything's good, we're trying to sleep." I expected that to be the end of it. A normal person would have left. A real ranger probably would have moved on. Instead, silence lingered. Then the man spoke again. "I still need to ask you a few questions." That was the moment every alarm bell in my head started ringing. Because now it wasn't a welfare check. Now it felt like he wanted us to open the door, and I had absolutely no intention of doing that. By then, Hunter had come out of his room. He looked exhausted and confused. I stepped back from the door and whispered, "Call the police." His eyes widened. "You serious? Just do it." Hunter immediately pulled out his phone. Meanwhile, I went back to the door. The guy kept asking questions. How many people were inside? How long were we staying? Had we seen anyone suspicious? I answered as vaguely as possible. Short answers. No useful information, just enough to keep him talking. The entire time, something felt deeply wrong. Then Hunter returned. His face had completely changed. He leaned close and whispered, "The police said no rangers were sent out here." My stomach dropped. There it was, confirmation. The person standing on our porch wasn't a ranger. He wasn't law enforcement. He wasn't conducting any welfare check. He was just some guy, a complete stranger, standing outside a remote cabin at 4 in the morning pretending to be a forest ranger. Suddenly, the entire situation felt 100 times more dangerous. The cabin no longer felt cozy. The woods no longer felt peaceful. Everything around us felt like a trap. I don't know how to explain this part, but somehow it felt like the guy outside sensed that we'd figured him out. His tone changed. The fake friendliness disappeared. His voice got louder, sharper, more aggressive. Then came another hard bang against the door. The entire frame shook. "Open the door." The words weren't a request anymore. They were a demand. I took a step back. "Number," another bang, louder this time. I said, "Open the door." "Number," the man's voice exploded. "You need to comply." Still pretending to be some kind of authority figure. Still playing the role. But now the mask was slipping, and what was underneath sounded dangerous. Very dangerous. I could hear the anger in every word. Then he shouted something that made my blood run cold. "If you don't open this door, I'll kick it down." Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. The cabin suddenly felt very small, very vulnerable. Then Anissa couldn't take it anymore. From behind me, she screamed, "Go away." The second those words left her mouth, everything got worse. The man lost whatever patience he had left. A violent kick slammed into the door. The entire cabin seemed to shake. Then another. And another. And another. This wasn't some drunk guy messing around. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was someone actively trying to get inside, And at that moment, I became absolutely certain of one thing. This man wanted to hurt us. Badly. Maybe worse. What happened next became the most terrifying few minutes of my entire life. The second that first kick hit the door, survival mode took over. Every ounce of uncertainty disappeared. This wasn't some confused hiker. This wasn't a ranger. And this definitely wasn't someone looking for help. Whoever was outside wanted inside, and he wanted in badly. Another kick slammed into the door. Bang! The frame rattled. Dust drifted down from the ceiling. Anissa let out a terrified gasp. I spun toward her bathroom. Now, she didn't argue. Didn't hesitate. She sprinted down the hallway and locked herself inside. At least if the guy got through the front door, she'd have another barrier between herself and whatever happened next. Hunter and I were left standing there alone, two terrified guys in a remote cabin. Neither of us had any idea what to do. The police were supposedly on the way, but out there, in the middle of nowhere. On the way could mean 10 minutes. It could mean 30. It could mean forever. And right then, it felt like we might not have that long. We rushed into the kitchen. Hunter grabbed a large chef's knife. I grabbed another one. Looking back, it is almost laughable. 2 kitchen knives against an unknown attacker. But when you are scared enough, you'll hold on to anything that makes you feel slightly less helpless. The kicking stopped. For a moment, everything went silent. That silence was somehow worse, because now we couldn't tell where he was. Hunter looked at me. Where'd he go? I shook my head. I don't know. Then we heard footsteps, heavy footsteps moving along the side of the cabin. The guy was circling the house, testing it, looking for another way inside. Hunter and I moved carefully through the cabin, tracking the sounds from room to room. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every shadow looked suspicious. Outside, the footsteps continued. Then they stopped. Complete silence again. I remember standing there gripping that knife so hard my hand hurt. My heart was pounding so violently that I could hear it in my ears. Then, crash, glass exploded somewhere behind us. The sound was deafening. Anissa screamed from the bathroom. Hunter nearly dropped his knife. For a split second, I thought the guy had come through. I thought he was already inside. We ran toward the sound and found one of the side windows completely shattered. Glass covered the floor. Rain was blowing through the opening. A large rock sat in the middle of the room. The guy had thrown it through the window. I immediately took a defensive position near the opening, waiting, watching, expecting him to climb through at any second. Hunter stood a few feet away doing the same thing. Neither of us spoke. Neither of us moved. We just stared, waiting for a face to appear. Waiting for a hand, waiting for something. Anything. But nothing came. The woods outside remained dark, silent, empty. At least that is how it looked, which somehow made it even more terrifying, because we knew he was out there somewhere, watching, listening, waiting. Every second felt like an hour. I kept expecting movement, kept expecting an attack, kept expecting him to burst through the opening, but he never did. Minutes dragged by. My legs started shaking. The adrenaline was overwhelming. I had never been that scared in my entire life, not even close. And then, faintly at first, a sound. A distant siren. Hunter heard it too. His head snapped up. Polis. The siren grew louder and louder. Relief hit me so hard I almost collapsed. For the first time all night, I felt like we might actually survive this. The moment those sirens got close, the sounds outside disappeared completely. No footsteps, no shouting, nothing. Whoever had been terrorizing us was gone. Just gone. The officers arrived a short time later. We explained everything, the fake ranger, the threats, the kicking, the broken window. The attempted break-in, the footprints, every single detail. The police immediately searched the property. Then they searched the woods. Then they expanded the search even farther. And somehow, they found absolutely nothing. No suspect, no vehicle, no trail. No evidence explaining where the guy went. Nothing. It was as if he had simply vanished. Hunter was furious. Honestly, I couldn't blame him. The guy had been attacking the cabin less than a minute before the police arrived. There was no way he could have gotten far, yet somehow they couldn't locate him. Hunter started arguing with the officers, demanding they keep looking, demanding they explain how someone could disappear that quickly. The officers didn't really have answers. Eventually, one of them gave us a piece of advice that surprised me. You should leave, not later, not tomorrow, immediately. Pack your things and go. That recommendation alone told me how serious they thought the situation was. So that is exactly what we did. We threw everything into the car as quickly as possible. Nobody cared about finishing the vacation anymore. Nobody cared about getting a refund. We just wanted out. Fast. As we drove away from the cabin, daylight was finally starting to appear through the trees. For the first time all night, I could actually see the forest around us. And somehow it looked even creepier. The adrenaline slowly began wearing off. That is when the reality of everything started sinking in. Think about it. That cabin was hidden deep in the woods. You couldn't even see the road from the property. Finding it accidentally would have been difficult. Yet somehow this stranger knew exactly where we were. He knew people were staying there. He arrived in the middle of the night. He pretended to be a forest ranger. And when that failed, he tried forcing his way inside. That doesn't sound random. That sounds planned. Even now, years later, that is the part that bothers me most. Not who he was, not what happened. But why? What exactly was his plan if we'd opened that door? What would have happened if Hunter hadn't called the police? What would have happened if those sirens had arrived 10 minutes later? I'll never know. And honestly, I don't think I want to. This happened back in 2016 when I was a senior in college. At the time, I was a member of TKA. And like a lot of fraternities, spring break was a huge deal. Every year, entire groups from fraternities and sororities would organize trips together. Sometimes it was Florida, sometimes Cancun, sometimes wherever someone found a good deal. That year, the destination was Acapulco. Within a few weeks, nearly 40 people had booked the trip. The resort looked incredible. Ocean views, pools, nightlife, everything college students imagine when they think about the perfect spring break. For the first few days, it was exactly that. Sunday all day, parties all night, nobody thinking about consequences, nobody thinking about danger. And that is where this story begins. The main character isn't actually me, it is my friend Sahil. Now, if you've ever had that one friend who somehow turns every simple situation into complete chaos, you already know what kind of person Sahil was. I mean that in the best possible way. He was funny, charismatic, the type of guy who could make friends with anyone, but he also had absolutely no sense of self-preservation. If there was a bad idea available, Sahil would somehow find it. And if there were 10 bad ideas available, he'd find the worst one. A few nights into the trip, a group of us decided to hit some local clubs. The place was packed, music blasting, lights flashing, hundreds of people everywhere. For a while, everything was great. Then I noticed Sahil doing something that instantly made me nervous. He was scanning the room, looking, searching, trying to find someone who could get him access to things that weren't being served at the bar. I walked over immediately. "Dude, don't." He laughed. "I am just looking." That is the problem. A few other guys joined in. Everyone told him the same thing. "Drop it. Forget it. We're in another country. Don't be stupid." Sahil rolled his eyes and eventually said he'd stop. The problem was that we'd known him for years. Nobody believed him. Not for a second. For a while, we kept an eye on him. But the club was enormous. Eventually, people got separated. Groups mixed together. Everyone started doing their own thing. And somewhere during all that chaos, Sahil disappeared. At first, nobody worried. Sahil disappearing into a crowd wasn't unusual. He was probably talking to strangers, making friends, doing something ridiculous. Normal Sahil behavior. Hours passed. Still no Sahil. Then people started texting him. No response. Calls went unanswered, straight to voicemail. Every single time. That was strange. Very strange because Sahil was obsessive about his phone. He always carried a charger, always monitored the battery. His phone dying wasn't something that happened. Suddenly the mood changed. One moment we were partying. The next moment everyone was searching, calling, texting, looking through the crowd, checking bathrooms, checking bars, checking outside. Nothing. No Sahil. No sign of him anywhere. Eventually we decided to leave. Our assumption was simple. He probably went back to the resort. Maybe he got drunk. Maybe he met somebody. Maybe he passed out. Whatever happened, we'd find him there. The streets outside the club were packed with people trying to get rides. The wait was ridiculous, so a few of us walked about a block away to call a car. It was around 1 in the morning. We were standing under streetlights waiting for our ride. Then someone pointed into the darkness. "Dude." At first I didn't recognize the figure. The person was limping, staggering, barely walking straight. Then he stepped closer, and my stomach dropped. It was Sahil. Something horrible had happened. Even from a distance it was obvious. His shirt was hanging off his body. Part of it was torn completely open. One side of his face was swollen. His lip was split. His knuckles were bloody, and he looked absolutely exhausted. Not drunk, not high, terrified. We ran over to him immediately. "What happened?" "Dude, are you okay? Where the hell were you?" He ignored almost every question. All he kept saying was, "I'll explain later." The entire ride back to the resort was silent. Nobody pushed him, nobody joked around. Everybody could see he was shaken, really shaken. Once we got back to the resort and into one of the rooms, Sahil finally sat down and started talking. What he told us made every person in that room feel sick. Earlier in the night, he'd found exactly what he was looking for. Near the bar, he met a short local guy who barely spoke English. Standing next to him was another man acting as a translator. According to Sahil, something about the translator felt wrong immediately. He couldn't explain it. Just a bad feeling. The kind of feeling your brain gives you before you understand why. Unfortunately, he ignored it. The short guy showed him a sample. Sahil tried it. Then every ounce of good judgment disappeared. The guy told him they couldn't do business inside the club. If he wanted more, he'd have to come outside. Every warning sign imaginable was there. Every red flag, every opportunity to walk away. And yet, Sahil followed them. A decision he would regret for the rest of his life, because the moment they stepped outside, everything changed. And what happened next nearly got him killed. The second Sahil stepped outside that club, he realized he had made a mistake. Unfortunately, by then it was already too late. According to him, there was a vehicle waiting just beyond one of the side exits. At first he assumed it belonged to the guys he had been talking to. Nothing seemed unusual. Then everything happened incredibly fast. Before he fully understood what was going on, hands grabbed him. One guy pulled open the back door, another shoved him forward, and suddenly he was inside the vehicle. The door slammed shut, the locks clicked, and they were moving. Sahil said that was the exact moment panic hit him. Not concern, not nervousness. Pure panic. Because now he understood something terrifying. He wasn't making a purchase. He wasn't hanging out with strangers. He had just gotten himself kidnapped. The city lights began disappearing behind them. The farther they drove, the more isolated everything became. Sahil tried demanding they stop. Nobody answered. He tried opening the door. Locked. Then the men started going through his pockets, not casually, aggressively. Like they'd done it before. They took his wallet, his cash, his cards, his watch. Anything that looked valuable. When Sahil realized what was happening, he fought back. That turned out to be another mistake. One of the men punched him immediately. Then another, then another. The beating came so fast he barely had time to react. He tried covering his face, tried protecting himself. It didn't matter. The men overwhelmed him instantly. They smashed his phone, destroyed it completely. Then they continued taking everything he had. By this point, Sahil wasn't thinking about money anymore. He wasn't thinking about his belongings. He was thinking about survival. Because once you've been forced into a vehicle by strangers in a foreign country, your mind starts going places you never wanted it to go. Where are they taking me? Why am I still alive? What is going to happen when the car stops? Those questions kept getting louder and louder in his head. Minutes felt like hours. He estimated they drove somewhere between 15 and 20 minutes, but he admitted he wasn't sure. Fear completely distorted his sense of time. It could have been less. It could have been more. All he knew was that every passing minute made him feel less likely to ever see his friends again. Then something happened that may have saved his life. One of the men suddenly asked a question, not in perfect English, but enough for Sahil to understand. Why are there so many Americans here right now? It seemed random, completely unrelated, but Sahil answered honestly. He explained that it was spring break. He told them dozens of students from his university were in the city. He mentioned that large groups were staying at the same resort. He talked about fraternity members, sorority members, entire groups of American college students. At the time, he wasn't trying to be strategic. He wasn't thinking ahead, he was just talking, trying to stay calm, trying to stay alive. But looking back, that conversation may have changed everything. The moment he finished speaking, the atmosphere inside the vehicle shifted. The men started talking rapidly in Spanish, back and forth. Back and forth, neither of us spoke the language, so Sahil had no idea what they were saying. But he knew they were discussing him. The conversation lasted several minutes, then suddenly it stopped. A few moments later, the vehicle slowed down. The men opened the door and threw him out. Literally threw him out. 1 second he was inside the vehicle. The next he was rolling across pavement, bruised, beaten, disoriented. The vehicle sped away almost immediately, leaving him stranded on a road he didn't recognize at first. He just lay there, trying to process what had happened, trying to understand why he was still alive. Eventually he stood up. Every part of his body hurt. His face was swollen. His ribs hurt. One leg was badly bruised. His phone was gone. His money was gone. Everything was gone. And he had absolutely no idea where he was. No map, no GPS, no transportation, nothing. Just darkness. For a while he considered staying put, but that didn't feel safe either. So he made a decision. He picked a direction and started walking. That is it. No plan. No certainty. Just walking. Every step was a guess. Every turn was a gamble. He later told us he kept expecting those men to come back, kept expecting another vehicle to pull up, kept expecting something worse, but nothing happened. The road remained empty, and somehow, against impossible odds, he chose the right direction. Because after what felt like forever, he eventually began recognizing parts of the city, then familiar streets, then familiar buildings. And finally, he saw us, standing under those streetlights waiting for our ride. To this day, I still think about how lucky that timing was. If we'd left 20 minutes earlier, we would have never seen him. If he'd walked a different direction, we would have never crossed paths. If those men had decided not to let him go, who knows what would have happened. And honestly, that is the part that still keeps me up at night. Because after hearing everything Sahil told us, one realization became impossible to ignore. Those guys weren't just robbers, not at first. The way they took him, the way they isolated him, the way they discussed him in that car, it felt like they were deciding something. Something much darker than simple theft. And the possibility of what that might have been is something none of us wanted to think about. After we got Sahil back to the resort, nobody really slept. Even though we were technically safe again, the energy had completely changed. The whole group sat in silence while Sahil finished explaining what happened. And the more details he gave, the worse it got. Because it wasn't just the beating, it wasn't just the robbery, it was everything leading up to it. The way the translator acted strange from the beginning, the way the short guy produced that sample almost instantly, like it was already prepared, the way they insisted on going outside instead of staying inside the club. Every piece of it felt like part of something bigger, something organized, something planned. Nobody really wanted to say the word out loud, but everyone was thinking it. Kidnapping. Or something close to it. Maybe worse. We debated calling the police for a while, but the problem was obvious. We were in a foreign country. We had no clear identities of the attackers. No location, no proof, just a story, and a badly beaten friend. Eventually, someone pointed out something nobody wanted to admit. If we went to authorities, we might end up creating more problems than we solved. For Sahil, for all of us, so we didn't report it. We just stayed quiet. The rest of the trip changed completely after that night. Nobody went out alone anymore. Nobody stayed out late. Every decision was made with hesitation. The fun didn't disappear instantly, but it was buried under something heavier. Something uncomfortable. Something everyone was trying not to talk about. Sahil recovered physically over the next few days, but mentally he was different. Quieter, more aware. Like something in him had been permanently switched on. As if he now understood how close things had actually come to going very, very wrong. We finished the trip without any more incidents, but it never felt the same. Not even close. Years later, I still think about that night sometimes, because there's a version of that story where we never found Sahil. A version where he doesn't walk down the right street. A version where we leave the club earlier or later and miss him completely. A version where those guys don't let him go. And the scariest part is how small all those differences really were. A few minutes, a different turn, a slightly longer drive. That's all it would have taken. We never officially learned what those guys were. We never found them again. And honestly, we never really wanted to. Because sometimes not knowing is the only thing standing between you and realizing how close you actually came to something unthinkable. This happened during spring break of my junior year in college, and even though a few years have passed, I still don't fully know how to explain what we walked into. I've always been a pretty skeptical person, not in a dramatic way, just observant. I notice small details. Things people usually ignore. Most of the time it's useless. But sometimes it's the only thing that makes sense when everything else feels off. This trip started pretty normally. My ex-girlfriend Anna had a friend named Lena who was always plugged into social circles, group chats, and party plans. So when Lena mentioned a spring break lake house trip in the Ozarks, it didn't sound strange at all. Just typical college stuff. A big house, a group of people, a week of drinking, music, and chaos. Nothing out of the ordinary. The four of us went together. Me, Anna, Lena, and Lena's boyfriend Colby. Colby drove because he had the biggest car. The road out there slowly got more isolated as we got closer. Less traffic. Fewer houses, more trees. By the time we reached the final stretch, it was just a winding road cutting through the woods. No signs of civilization in any direction. We arrived around 5 p.m. And the first thing I remember thinking was that the house was way bigger than expected. Massive, sitting right on the water with a huge wraparound deck and a dock stretching out into the lake. It honestly looked like something out of a movie. But then I noticed something else. Too many cars. A lot more than we were told. Lena had said maybe 15 or 20 people. But I counted at least 25 cars in the grass. More were parked down the road. And that was just the beginning. A guy met us at the front door. He looked our age, maybe a little older. He introduced himself like he'd done it 100 times before. Too smooth. Too rehearsed. Like he wasn't meeting guests. Like he was running a system. He gave us a long explanation. House rules, where things were, what we could and couldn't do. Then he brought up something that immediately stood out. Keys, he said, for safety reasons. Everyone had to hand over their car keys. No exceptions. He talked about liability. About the narrow roads, about drinking. It sounded reasonable on the surface, but something about the way he said it felt off. Like it wasn't a suggestion, it was a requirement. Colby hesitated for half a second, then handed his keys over. The host smiled like he just won something, and placed them into a bowl already full of other keys. That moment stuck with me because there were a lot of keys in that bowl, more than made sense for a casual lake house trip. We brushed it off and went inside. The party atmosphere hit immediately. Music, drinks, people everywhere. But something was weird almost instantly. Lena didn't recognize anyone, not a single person, and neither did we. At first I assumed she just wasn't seeing her friends yet, but as the night went on, that explanation stopped working. People didn't seem to know each other the way you'd expect at a big group trip. It felt more like smaller groups had been dropped into the same house. Separate clusters. Not one connected party, just fragments. Still, we tried to ignore it. Colby and I ended up playing pool, meeting people, drinking, doing what college kids do. On the surface, everything looked normal, even fun. But I couldn't stop watching the host. He wasn't partying. He wasn't drinking. He was moving through the house constantly, observing, checking, writing things down on a clipboard. That detail really stuck with me. A clipboard at a party. Like he was tracking something. At one point, I noticed him standing near a back door, watching people while writing notes. Not socializing, just monitoring. That's when the feeling started settling in. Something wasn't right. The next morning made it worse. I woke up earlier than everyone and went outside alone. That's when I noticed something important. The bowl of keys wasn't by the door anymore. It had been moved. I didn't know why, but it made my stomach tighten. Later that day, a couple from the group left, packed up, said goodbye, drove away. Nothing unusual. At least that's what I thought. Because that night, I saw them again. At the bonfire, sitting on the far side of the circle. Same clothes, same faces, same everything. I told Anna immediately. She thought I was mistaken. But I wasn't. I checked the driveway. Their car was gone, completely gone. But they were still there, and that contradiction didn't make sense at all. By the second day, the paranoia wasn't just mine anymore. Anna started noticing things too, people with similar stories, weird overlaps, details that didn't line up. It felt like the longer we stayed, the more the house revealed itself. Like it was testing how much we would accept without asking questions. Eventually, the feeling became unbearable. Something in me kept screaming that we needed to leave. That staying one more night was a mistake. Colby didn't believe it was serious. Lena didn't want to ruin the trip, but Anna agreed with me. We decided to leave. That's when everything changed. The moment I asked for our keys, the entire atmosphere shifted. The music felt quieter. The room felt smaller. And suddenly it felt like everyone was watching me. Not casually. Intensely, the host tried to delay us. Offered plans, offered drinks, talked in circles. Smiling too much, then not smiling at all. When I refused to stay, the smile disappeared completely. That was the first time I saw his real expression, cold, blank. Almost mechanical. A girl nearby said something that made my skin crawl. That's not a good idea. Just like that. No explanation, no context. Just a warning. Then the room went silent, and the host finally agreed. He took me down a hallway. No one else was allowed to follow. At the end of it, there was a room full of keys hanging on hooks. He didn't ask which ones were mine. He already knew. That detail still bothers me, because it means he was tracking everything. He handed me the keys and said something I'll never forget. "You're making a mistake." We left 10 minutes later. Nobody stopped us. But as we drove away, I looked back one last time. And on the deck, people were standing in a line. Watching, not waving, not moving. Just staring at our car as we left. Even now, I still don't know what that place really was. A party, a setup, something worse. All I know is this: 3 different trips, 3 different places. And in all of them, something felt like it was watching.